One of the things that I think this conference has done well already, and I think it will continue to do today and tomorrow, is remind us of how high the stakes are in this business. That the first semester of a student's life in college doesn't just matter for that student's life in college, it matters for their life. And that it is an incredibly fragile time for that student. And this room is actually full of all of the people that can make that transition into college and ultimately success happen. It's a powerful room. One of the other risks with a group like this, and this is one that I'm inherently aware of, is it's really easy to lose sight of student stories. We have state legislators in here, we have state higher education system leaders in here, college presidents. It's really easy to lose sight of student stories. For my part, I keep the student story of one particular student veteran and soldier in mind. And I think back to this student veteran story. About a week after getting home from Iraq, he was in college, about 7 days from getting home to sitting in a college classroom. And do not be confused. You can do a year in Iraq. Setting foot on a college campus as a 23-year-old is terrifying. And the entire time that that student is walking around campus for the first semester, the first year, that student has a refrain going through their head. Can I do this? Can I succeed? Now, the head fake here is, that's not just what's going through student veterans' heads. That's what's going through all of our fragile student population's heads. All of our first-gen students, all of our adult learners, all of our underserved students are asking themselves, can I do this? Can I succeed? And again, many of the people who could answer yes to that question are in this room. Now, I know this student story well because under that flight helmet is me, a 20-year-old me that wanted to get home from Iraq safely and go to college. And I will, thank you. I will always be grateful to Austin Peay State University in Clarksville, Tennessee, who answered my question, could I succeed? Yeah, you can. Let's help you. One of the things about American higher education that hasn't been touched on yet today that we need to touch on, because everybody is here sitting with state teams, is public higher education is a state enterprise. States drive this. So if we're going to talk about an American dream, we have to make sure that we're also talking about a Connecticut dream, and an Arizona dream, and a Missouri dream, and a Tennessee dream. And so what we're going to share with you over the next few minutes is how we have sought to translate an American dream into a Tennessee dream. We are a state that lags many of you in many important indicators. We are behind where your states are now, and we're seeking to change that. A couple of years ago, we realized that the way we talk about going to college is designed by the fluent for the fluent. You would never ask someone to buy a car by saying, I need you to fill out an 8-page, 108-question questionnaire. After you fill that out, you might have enough money to maybe buy this car. That is the exact process we have in place right now for students. Fill out the FAFSA, the worst document ever. If you were going to design something to keep students from going to college, it's what you would come up with. We put students in this position where we make them try to discern messages. And in Tennessee, what we realized was we were just going to change that message. We were going to change that message to one sentence. You go to community or technical college free. That was the Tennessee promise. Next fall, every adult in Tennessee goes to community college for free under Tennessee Reconnect. Here's what we've seen so far. First, number one in the nation for FAFSA by about 12 points. No one's even close. Sorry. Our college going rate went up 5% in 12 months. In 12 months, 4,000 more students went to college than the year before. And then the final one that I'm most excited about, and especially at a completion-based conference, we should emphasize, if you're a Tennessee Promise student right now, your persistence rate is 16 percentage points higher than a non-Promise student. All of that is to say, I'm going to bring out some of the people that are helping make this Tennessee dream a reality. But if there's one theme I want you to take away from this bottom line up front, incremental progress sounds great to policymakers. Incremental progress is not good enough for students. If you are waiting on the increments to take effect, that's not good. So our Tennessee theme has been do everything all at once. And I want to bring up the people that are doing it all at once. You guys, come on out. One of the things in my job is I watch presidential searches quickly. I'm not allowed to have a candidate, but sometimes you're rooting for somebody. I was rooting for Dr. Rebecca Ashford to become a community college president. Why? Because she's a first-generation community college graduate and now a community college president.
Thank you.
Dr. Krissy DeAlejandro founded and ran the predecessor to Tennessee Promise, which was called tnAchieves, for 6 years before the state decided, we need to get into this business. If there is a more unflinching student advocate in America, I am not aware. She is the person you do not necessarily want to always bring to the faculty meeting because she is going to ask why over and over. And if there is any barrier to student success, she's going to say, get rid of it. And she's going to say it just like that. In fact, she might say that in a minute, actually. And then finally, Dr. Kenyatta Lovett, who has become, you see his organizational affiliation. If you all don't have a complete Tennessee in your state, I urge you to get one. This is a nonprofit advocacy organization that stands outside of higher ed, pushing higher ed. And he's pushing me, and we want him to. So thank you, Dr. Lovett. So to start off, we've had a little bit of a personal tone throughout the morning, and I did want to ask Krissy for you to share your story, your American dream story, and kind of how you bring that to work every day.
Absolutely. So thankful and honored to be here. So my story began like this. When my mother was 15, she decided to drop out of high school to marry my 18-year-old father, and 1 year later, they brought me home to a little trailer, and we began our lives. Neither of my parents went to college, but they fostered my curiosities, and they instilled in me a great sense of learning from the very beginning. When it became time to think about college, we had no one to ask questions. I grew up in a very small town, rural part of Tennessee, and I graduated with about 450 other students. The college-going rate in my high school at the time was about 15%, so it wasn't really a college-going culture at home. It also was not a college-going culture in my high school, but I was determined to get to college. We did not file a FAFSA, agreeing with Mike, worst document ever, because no one told us that a FAFSA existed. We also didn't know that maybe I wouldn't get into the one college that I applied to, so I only applied to one college, and thankfully I got in. And the day that I received my acceptance letter, I remember looking at my parents' faces and reflecting now. I could get very emotional because they were excited, but there was also this look of how in the world are we ever going to pay for this? So when I landed at the University of the South, Sewanee, hooray! Sewanee.
There's always one.
I was so foreign to the world in my Chevrolet Cavalier, and I remember my first paper, the professor wrote, "Have you ever written a paper before?" And I thought, actually, no. It's lovely. So for me, the experience was really about digging in, asking so many questions, and deciding that I was, in fact, college material. So to date, tnAchieves has now worked with 259,000 students since we launched in 2008. So 65% of our students are the first in their family to go to college. 70% come from a household that earns $50,000 or less. For us, it's about sending the student to college who never thought that college was an option, but more importantly, it's about ensuring that they earn a degree. So for us, what I take to work every day is how can we provide the support systems that our students inevitably need to be successful. Yes, Tennessee Promise has been phenomenal. We in Tennessee are fortunate to have the higher education governor. Governor Haslam has been incredible in this work. The funding, however, I always say it's the carrot that brings students and families to us, but truly the reason behind our success was the insight in a holistic approach to student success. We operationalize this by truly providing a local support via a mentor, 9,000 volunteers recruited every year to ensure that student moves smoothly through this, what can be terrible process to navigate, particularly for our first generation students. So 259,000 stories for me, but Virginia is one of my favorite stories. She's from our 2010 cohort. No one in Virginia's family had ever gone to college before. In fact, her parents had both dropped out of high school, but she was determined, and she was paired with a volunteer mentor, Laura Harrell, who has now mentored with tnAchieves for 10 years, but this relationship fostered a love of learning for Virginia. Virginia made it onto the college campus, Pellissippi State Community College, graduated on time, and then transferred to the University of Tennessee. Not only did Laura attend Virginia's Pellissippi graduation, she also attended her University of Tennessee graduation, and now Virginia is earning her master's degree, and Laura tells me she will 100% be at that college graduation. My favorite part about this story, it's a story of perseverance, it's a story of mentorship, but now Virginia mentors Tennessee Promise students because what she told me is that every student needs a Laura.
Rebecca, how long have you been a president?
I've been a president at Chattanooga State Community College for 5 months.
In those 5 months, you've done, I know, the typical new assessment scan of your campus. What are the completion initiatives that you are kind of looking at as most critical moving forward?
So when I started at Chattanooga State, long 5 months ago, I was really, I was thrilled immediately, thrilled and impressed that the college had merged 2 initiatives. One was its Achieving the Dream initiative. It had been an Achieving the Dream school about a year before that, and started that process, and then also had a grant, a Title III Strengthening Institutional Programs grant called Focus on Completion. And so when I got there, I started talking to the leadership of those initiatives and saying, you know, this really is one initiative. So we merged those 2 things into one very comprehensive initiative called Focus on Completion. And the many parts of this and characteristics and initiatives that we're doing within it, I know so many of you will recognize because they're really great high impact practices and proven strategies for student success. You'll see a graphic here up on the screen. I know it's hard to read, and I'll just hit a few of the highlights. When a student applies to Chattanooga State, they are assigned this team of people who help them. They have a student success coach who helps them get through the application process, but then stays with them through the first 24 hours. They have embedded within the academic divisions a completion specialist and also their faculty advisors. And all of these folks, again, surround these students with this web of support. The success coaches and the completion specialists are helping to address early alerts as those are submitted regarding students. And what's great is it's the same people reaching out to that student rather than a stranger that they've never met before. So I'm really proud of that. I want to focus on the teaching and learning piece here on our high impact practices. We have our big hips. We have a lot of jokes about our big hips on campus at Chattanooga State. And I'm really proud of the work that we're doing there and the leadership our faculty have taken on this. We have our HIP leader faculty who are mentors and have served to train other faculty. We have a faculty and staff development center, a professional development center called the Care Center. We do a lot of the professional development regarding all of our initiatives there. And we, of course, are focused on our institutional learning outcomes, which are just embedded in everything happening in the classroom and also outside of the classroom. Regarding support services, I want to point out our tutoring. We've done some work with tutoring with our co-requisite remediation. So first of all, we found when we started co-requisite remediation that students went from, a 13% completion rate of those courses in the math and 18% in English. So we went with the embedded or the co-requisite remediation, we went up to about 52%. For the students that added on the tutoring, it went up to 63%. So we're really thrilled with those results. Our high school program, we actually have 3 high schools at the Chattanooga State campus, plus a myriad of dual enrollment opportunities for our students. And the great part about this is we're partnering with our school district, of course, but also partnering with business and industry to find out what are the programs and skills that you're needing our students to have so that they can get jobs when they graduate and meet workforce needs. And then the part that we're really scaling up right now is our academic mapping and degree sequencing. And we have faculty, members of our faculty senate are taking the lead on this and making sure we have an academic map for all of our degree programs. So we have a very comprehensive program going on with our focus on completion efforts. So really, this is the main thing. This has been the focus of everything we're doing. In addition to providing support for our Tennessee Promise students, we have a new grant from THEC for our Tennessee Promise students. So all of our Tennessee Promise students are required to do 8 hours of community service each semester. So with our grant, we're ensuring that that community service aligns with their intended degree path. So if they're in an allied health focus or a business focus, we're wanting to match their service learning with that focus area. And then also the other big thing we're focusing on is, as Mike mentioned earlier, with our Tennessee Reconnect, that last dollar scholarship for adults in Tennessee, we're really looking at what do we need to do to change our campus so that we are adult-friendly and adult-ready starting in the fall of 2018. So that's all. That's all we've been focusing on.
5 months. I want to stay with this for a moment because I'm struck by how your faculty are leading this work. Can you talk a little bit about how that faculty culture has evolved?
Yes, so I too have been very impressed by that, and that's not to say that every faculty member is completely on board. I wish that were the case, but it really seems to me, I think things started to shift with our Achieving the Dream initiative because that was such a comprehensive planning process where so many people at every level of the institution, but particularly faculty, were involved in the planning for that. So I think that helped to get them on board. And also much of this is being driven from our Care Center, that Faculty and Staff Development Center, which is really focused on developing our faculty and the skills that they have. So it seems like we've got a good core who are on board 100%, but then some of the others who might be a little bit more skeptical, also skeptical about, is this going to stick? Is our new president going to be behind this? Those are coming on board as well. So I've been very impressed with the level of faculty engagement with it.
Kenyatta, about 14 months ago, you stood up a new 501c3 in Tennessee, correct? Can you share briefly, what is the mission of Complete Tennessee?
Yes, and I'm glad to be here. In a nutshell, at Complete Tennessee, we believe that we should localize the state's completion agenda to make sure that we have all institutions, but also community leaders and employers together in this completion plan to find strategies that mean the most to their own local concerns. And so we do that by engaging them, educating them, and mobilizing them to hold institutions accountable, but also create the solutions that are going to work best for their region or for their community.
So your first year you've spent mostly on the road, traveling around the state, correct?
Yes.
You know
And
where every Chick-fil-A in Tennessee is?
You can drive to Canada faster than you can drive across the state.
It's a true story.
It's really fun.
What have you heard that has excited you as you talk to stakeholders?
What's excited me is that there are a lot of communities without the incentive of funding that have begun to develop their own strategies as a collective group of institutions, as community leaders, school systems, to create plans of success. The one that I can think of that I'm most proud of, and Rebecca, you're right there in ground zero, is Chattanooga has developed a Chattanooga 2.0 plan. They created their own attainment goal, and they've begun to raise funds and create strategies by which this whole pipeline, really a birth through J pipeline, has an articulated plan by which every Chattanoogan can see themselves in it and hopefully get to that goal. And we're seeing that across the state where counties are excited about formalizing their plans and working with institutions to figure out how can we best tackle this problem. So I think in my role in my time in higher ed, the enrollment-driven mindset left little for community members, community leaders, employers to engage in this work. But now that we're talking about completion, they find themselves a space that they can take part in and really try to tackle this problem as we all need to across the nation.
What did you hear that worried you?
What worries me is that there is an entire population that is totally disengaged from this completion agenda. We see about 30% or a little bit more that do not go to college. And when we look in our urban areas and our rural areas, there is a lack of value for higher education. The key word is really access. From the student, whether an adult or a high school student, they lack the access of information of knowing what are the jobs out there that are available to them and what credentials are necessary to get those jobs. Inside the institution, there's an access problem to resources, timely resources, that could be books, emergency funds, but even outside of the institution, while the students are in college, there's an access situation where we're finding that our transit lines for urban areas are not benefiting the students or workers. They more benefit the tourists or travelers that come through their region. And so students, I'll give you an example. In Nashville, a student could be literally 4 minutes from a campus, but because of the bus lines, it would be 2 hours. Now, if they have a child, if they have a job, how in the world are they going to go to college if it takes them 2 hours from their home to get to college? And so access from that perspective is still an issue in spite of Tennessee Promise and Tennessee Reconnect. And ultimately for our employers, the question we get across the state is, are you going to create just a lot of credentials and say, yay, we reached the drive to 55 and we're there? Or are you going to create the right credentials that are going to matter to the skills that we need and the pipeline we need of talent to keep us going? Tennessee right now has the lowest unemployment rate of its history, but at the same time, we've added 2 additional economically distressed counties, and we have the 8th lowest worker participation rate. So right now, what our work is to battle this tale of 2 states where there are a lot of students, a lot of citizens that are just totally disengaged from this completion agenda that we've invested so much into.
What do we do on that, Krissy?
What we found is that the student that we're trying to reach is that low-income student, the student just like me, the student in that Q1 that we talked about earlier. And I think it's about shifting the culture. Many of our counties saw a 20% jump in their college-going rate the first year of Tennessee Promise. I don't know about you, but to me, that is a game changer. And what we have to ensure is that when the student does land on the campus, that the student has a really positive, successful experience, because the people from Nashville or the people from the college can come and talk about the importance all day long of earning some type of post-secondary credential, but I'm convinced that when the student who never thought that college was an option lands at Rebecca's institution and graduates, that student is our best advocate for this completion agenda. Not only is the student the best advocate, but in rural Tennessee, the mama is also the best advocate that we have. And so we're trying to create, to Kenyatta's point, in Tennessee groundswell. This is not coming from the top. We are truly trying to create a grassroots effort where we're also saying to the colleges, we understand that your graduation rates are not where they need to be. Let us be good partners to you to try new things, to try new programs. One program that we piloted last year in inner city Memphis, we had 16 high schools where the college going rate was less than 10%. And so we did a 10-week intensive summer bridge program, credit-bearing summer bridge program. 100% of the students were African American, 85% were touched by Pell, 74% of those students left with 9 credit hours because of the co-requisite model. That's a game changer. So we have to think about what's working inside our states, but more importantly, what's working and how do we scale those with fidelity? Because 30 students, that's a huge win, but we got to touch 30,000 students to move the needle.
So when I hear scaling with fidelity, what I hear is the thought that when we figure out how to do something at one college, we probably need to do it very similarly at other colleges. When you're a president and your fellow presidents, how do we make sure we get there?
Well, first of all, I think it's important that as presidents, we're talking to each other and sharing best practices in a non-threatening kind of way, in a non-competitive kind of way. And I think within Tennessee, we have all the community colleges and technical colleges are part of the Tennessee Board of Regents system. So we're all meeting and talking together very often. And actually, many of the initiatives that we are working on have come as an outgrowth of the Tennessee Board of Regents and the work that many of the leaders there have done, and also through the Tennessee Higher Education Commission. So I think that sort of state-level engagement has helped to spread good practices from one institution to another.
So Kenyatta, your perspective on this is interesting, and I didn't do a good job of introducing. You were Assistant Vice President at a community college, Associate Vice Chancellor at the Board of Regents before you stepped out. What do you now see on the outside you desperately need us on the inside to hear?
I think higher ed, even while inside, it's a closed system. And I talked with our registrars a couple of months ago, and they told me the number one, and this is public-private 2- and 4-year institutions, the primary reason for withdrawals from college was social and emotional issues. I think for our higher education institutions to believe that they can tackle all of the problems of a student on their own is a failed strategy. There's no way you can be experts in social and emotional learning, but there are nonprofits and their organizations right there in your community that can help you with it. But without opening that door and at least being honest about the issues, you won't be able to create that engagement. So one of the things that we've done, and you mentioned I worked in higher ed, and so I became somewhat of a trader. We published all of the graduation rates for the public to see. And it wasn't a pretty picture because we had one community college that had a 5% graduation rate after 3 years. African Americans in Tennessee have a 5% graduation rate at community colleges. And the reality is that the majority of the students will not be successful the way the systems work now. And even worse, when we all know that graduation rates are tied to income. And highlighting that really, at the first point, I think, for institutions, I even received when you were there, when I presented some of our findings, whispers of trader, get lost, and whatever you could think of for someone highlighting those numbers. But now the numbers are out there, and what we're seeing now is the community members are coming in. They do have pride in their community colleges and their universities, but without highlighting the problems and the issues that you can't solve alone, there's no way in the world that you're going to be able to access the resources that I know will definitely work for getting this completion rate to where we need to be.
Kenyatta, I'd like to build upon what Kenyatta just said. You mentioned the community piece, and thank you for mentioning Chattanooga 2.0 earlier. In the Chattanooga community, there's a great group of leaders who are supporting initiatives to basically double the rate of post-secondary credentials in the Chattanooga community. So it's almost like a mini version of the Drive to 55 within Chattanooga. And so that's a really good thing that you have all these community leaders who are seeing the importance of students completing their credentials. And I'll tell you, much of that interest is coming from a workforce perspective. So they're saying, in Chattanooga, this is so important that students are completing college credentials because we want our economic development, we want our workforce to be strong, we want more companies to locate here, we want the jobs to be strong here. So that's part of the incentive, which is a great thing, I think, because it's brought people to the table, and we very openly share our historically low graduation rates from Chattanooga State, which are moving up with all of the initiatives we have going and with Tennessee Promise, and simply, I think, even just with a focus on let's graduate. You know, we had a lot of students who were graduating, who were transferring on without graduating prior to the last several years. So, but my point is, I think that community support is so important. In fact, even with our Achieving the Dream initiatives at Chattanooga State, our community leaders have been very helpful in making that happen, even with donations to help fund initiatives.
And I think piggybacking off that, I mean, the part of Promise you hear about is the warm and fuzzy, let's get our students to a post-secondary credential. And what's often overlooked is building the advocates for higher ed via our mentoring program. 9,000 people are engaging. 30% of those are coming from business and industry. Chamber presidents, CEOs, CFOs of companies. And so while Kenyatta and his organization is doing an amazing job of presenting the metrics, these people are now attached to humans, right? Real students who are experiencing the barriers keeping them from earning a post-secondary credential. I have a great story from Tuesday. A business person called me, a mentor, CFO of a major company, because her student has now found herself in a place of homelessness. And so obviously the mentor doesn't know the mechanics of how to help the student, but she now has a conduit, and she said to me, I had no idea that this was happening with our 17 and 18-year-olds. And we talk about food insecurity and social and emotional well-being, but here we've gained another advocate to understand the complexities of higher ed and what is built into those graduation rates.
So I feel like naturally our conversation always, we gravitate towards the traditional student. And next fall, we have this incredible opportunity, but also challenge with adults coming on our campuses. And I will ask all three of you in a lightning round. I'm going to start with Kenyatta. What do we need to change on our campuses right now to make sure adult learners can succeed?
Don't take my answer.
Go.
I won't take your answer. I would say that for our adults, I think institutions need to have some serious listening sessions with adults in their region to understand things outside of the thing that I won't mention right now because I can't. But what we found in certain areas that there are local access barriers that institutions can vocalize to policymakers that are issues. So what we found out in Nashville is the reality that that low-income housing sometimes is not available to individuals if they get certain benefits or they take an internship on. And so for adults that really want to go back to college, I've learned of this thing called a benefits cliff. Maybe institutions aren't aware of that, but there are a lot of reasons why adults cannot go back to college that I think they need to take the time to really listen to individuals about what those barriers are before we even get to things within the institution. So benefits cliff really centers on the worry that will you get me to an income level just slightly enough over not having those benefits where I'm still feeling the effects of poverty. Transit lines or other things that I think institutions can listen to adults in the region and then have those conversations with local policymakers, maybe even state policymakers of, you're impacting completion, and as a result, you're impacting tax revenue, you're impacting the overall well-being of your entire community, and if you can just change these things slightly, maybe we can see more adults come back into the pipeline. But the first thing is you have to talk to adults and find out what's happening outside of the institution that's going to keep them from going to college, but also keeping them from completing college. Did I do a good job?
You did a great job. I'm so proud of you.
It's completely non-compliant with lightning round parameters. But a great answer.
Are we just supposed to say one word?
I loved the answer. Lightning round, go.
Okay,
Adults.
so with adults, which is not my area of expertise, but we have to eliminate the complexities at the college. Ask yourself, if you were working at a college, why is this the process? right? For many students, non-traditional as well as traditional, they get tripped up on what's a semester? Why do I need to meet with an advisor? Is that important? So explaining the why, if the why is important, and doing that examination of who's your customer? The customer is the student. It's not your faculty, and it is not your staff.
Dr. Ashford?
In a word, the schedule. And I mean the academic schedule, when and how you're offering your classes. And I'm looking very critically at my college, so I say your, but I'm really saying mine. Are we offering programs in an accelerated way that it would appeal to adult, that doesn't sound like, oh my God, it's going to take me 10 years to get this 2-year degree, and I really just want to get this done? Are we offering enough hybrid, online, weekend, evening, and my goodness, can you get a sandwich after 5 p.m.? So to me, it's, in a word, the schedule, academic and service.
So we've talked a little bit, and we've tried to focus here on, I think, that we try not to believe our own hype in Tennessee. We have a lot of work to do. We have focused, I think, on challenges. I do want to pivot and talk positive, though, about, what are you most excited about when you look ahead? We're 4 or 5 years into this work. We are beginning to see data turn. We're seeing completion rates inch up. What are you most excited about? And I'll throw that out to the group.
I guess I'm just most excited about the possibilities. And that might sound kind of Pollyanna. We've done so much. We've come so far. The fact that representatives from Tennessee are invited to sit on stages like this, I mean, it just floors me. So I'm excited about how far we've come in a relatively short period of time. And I think I'm done. No. And I think the sky is the limit, because we have such a great foundation in place, and we can only go up. So that's what excites me.
I'm excited about culture shift. As I said, rural, small town girl, we've got to shift the culture. We have to redefine what college means, and we have to make it meaningful for families. We also have to make it comprehensive in terms of why do you need a post-secondary credential, and how does that translate into your future life, into the workforce within the community. And we're seeing that culture shift in Tennessee. I've been traveling with this work for the last decade, and I don't hear as much, my kid's not college material, or, oh, we don't believe in college. We're really redefining that work in Tennessee, and I think it all began with the Complete College 2010, this focus on completion, and then has continued with Tennessee Promise and Tennessee Reconnect.
The conversation for me is starting to really advance around equity, and in an enrollment mindset. We just talked diversity, but now we're talking outcomes for everyone at an equal rate, and that's promising.
I would say I'll take moderator privilege to add something I'm excited about, if that's okay. I think the concept of ownership is beginning to take hold on our campuses. Should a financial aid counselor have the ability to shrug a student out of college? And it happens every day, where a financial aid counselor, one, sitting there at that counter, has the ability to say, I don't know, and then a student walks away. I'm seeing that change. I'm seeing student affairs vice presidents and business officer vice presidents take ownership of process. And I think as much as a lot of us try to think about the really big picture, the reality for us is reaching our Tennessee attainment goal probably relies on financial aid counselors and student advisors and faculty members that aren't willing to shrug a student away.
That's great.
All right, wrapping up. Advice to other states here, and please let us also be frank about mistakes we've made that others could learn from.
I guess from the campus level, before I was at Chattanooga State, I was at Pellissippi State, which is in Knoxville, which is sort of the birthplace of the Tennessee Promise program. From a campus level, I would say get on board. There have been a number of initiatives that have come out at the state level Tennessee Promise being one of them, to be quite frank, where not all institutions embraced it right away. And that was a mistake. And it's probably part of a culture shift and that ownership that you talked about, Mike. But I think that probably made progress a little more slow.
So your advice then is build that ownership and build that buy-in?
Build the ownership. But if you're on a campus level and your state is going on this path, get on board from the campus level.
Krissy?
I would say be metrics driven, but student focused. I work for a nonprofit. I answer to 5 business guys, and it's not okay if I drop the ball, and it's also not okay if I don't know my numbers. And so being metrics driven, but student focused, I still talk to students and families every day, and it helps me inform these guys of what's happening on the ground in real time with our students.
I want to just plug Krissy here. I think every community college student and parent in the state of Tennessee has her cell phone number. I'm just saying.
True.
That's actually true and terrifying. But I think having a person or a group of people who are truly fielding that information that can inform policy change, and I'm so fortunate to have such a great relationship with Mike and our governor's team to say, hey guys, this is what we see that's actually not working for students, and we all mobilize around it very quickly and try to find a solution. We are very solutions oriented now in Tennessee.
That's well said. Kenyatta?
Find a way to bring external stakeholders to the table to talk specifically about completion. Just completion only, not enrollment, not job placement, but completion. And I think you'll find some partners that are willing to help you.
Please join me in thanking our panel.